Ever felt judged? Not just a glance, but a deliberate, public humiliation? That's what happened to young Maya Johnson on a transatlantic flight, all because of her bag. A seasoned flight attendant, Clara Albright, with a smirk that could curdle milk, openly mocked Maya's seemingly inexpensive luggage. Little did Clara know, fate had a first-class ticket for irony. What unfolded at 30,000 feet and on the ground afterward was a shocking display of power, prejudice, in the swift, undeniable hand of karma. This isn't just an airplane story. It's a real-life tale of how a moment of cruel judgment backfired spectacularly, involving a powerful airline CEO and a young woman who stood her ground. Buckle up. This story is about to take off. Maya clutched the strap of her duffel bag a little tighter as she navigated the crowded aisle of the Boeing 777. The overhead compartments were filling up quickly, and she was anxious to secure a spot for her belongings. It wasn't a designer bag, she knew. It was a sturdy, well-worn canvas affair, a reliable companion on countless weekend trips and budget travels. It held everything she needed for her 2-week study abroad program in London, a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation bubbling within her. This was her first time flying internationally, a significant step towards her dream of working in global health. As she reached her assigned row, 23 near the back of the plane, she spotted an empty space in the overhead bin. Perfect. She hoisted the bag upwards, a slight strain in her shoulders as she maneuvered it into position. Just as she was about to slide it in, a voice sharp and laced with a saccharine sweetness that felt utterly false cut through the ambient hum of boarding passengers. "Oh, my dear, are you sure that's going to fit?" Maya turned to see a flight attendant standing a few feet away, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair gleaming under the cabin lights. Her name tag read Clara Albright, and her smile didn't quite reach her icy blue eyes. There was an air of practiced elegance about her, the kind that spoke of years spent gliding through the aisles, catering to the whims of privileged travelers. Maya, a little flustered, replied politely, "Yes, ma'am, I think so. It's just a soft bag." Clara raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her gaze sweeping from Maya's bag to her face with an almost imperceptible air of disdain. "Well, it certainly looks comfortable." The emphasis on comfortable hung in the air, dripping with condescension. A few nearby passengers, already settling into their seats, couldn't help but glance over, a ripple of awkward curiosity spreading through the immediate vicinity. Maya's cheeks flushed slightly. She knew her bag wasn't fancy, but it was functional, and it was hers. She didn't see what the issue was. "It's just my carry-on," she said, trying to keep her tone even. Clara didn't let it go. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow managed to carry several rows. "Darling, are you sure you wouldn't prefer to check that? We have very limited space, you see, and some of our other passengers have rather substantial luggage." Her eyes flicked pointedly towards a sleek designer suitcase being lifted into a nearby bin. The implication was clear. Maya's bag was cheap, bulky, and didn't belong in the same space as the substantial luggage of more affluent travelers. The microaggression, veiled in a veneer of professional concern, stung. Maya felt a knot of humiliation tighten in her stomach. She was already feeling a little out of place, being one of the younger passengers, and Clara's comments only amplified that feeling. "No, thank you," Maya said firmly, meeting Clara's gaze directly. "It fits just fine." She gave the bag a final push, and it slid neatly into the overhead compartment. Clara's smile tightened, the ice in her eyes hardening. "Very well, but if it causes any issues later, don't say I didn't warn you." She turned away with a dismissive flick of her wrist, her attention immediately shifting to a group of first-class passengers who were just boarding, her demeanor instantly transforming into one of obsequious charm. Maya took her window seat, her initial excitement for the trip now slightly tarnished. She couldn't shake off the feeling of being judged, of being made to feel less than because of something as trivial as her luggage. She watched as Clara continued her duties, her interactions with other passengers a stark contrast to her condescending attitude towards Maya. It was as if she operated on a hierarchy of perceived worth, and Maya had clearly fallen toward the bottom. The plane continued to fill, the usual pre-flight bustle creating a cacophony of sounds. Just as the final boarding call was made, a hush fell over the first-class section. A tall, distinguished-looking man with silvering temples and an air of quiet authority stepped onto the plane. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and his presence seemed to command attention without him even trying. Maya, being near the back, didn't pay him much mind initially. But then she noticed the almost deferential way the other flight attendants greeted him, their smiles genuine, their movements precise. There was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Clara, who had been busy assisting a passenger with their carry-on near the front of economy class, caught sight of him, and her entire demeanor changed. The icy professionalism melted away, replaced by a radiant, almost girlish smile. She hurried towards him, her steps light and eager. "Richard, darling, you made it just in time." Her voice, which had been so sharp with Maya moments before, was now soft and affectionate as she greeted the man with a warm embrace and a kiss on the cheek. Richard Albright. The name clicked in Maya's mind. She vaguely recalled reading something about the CEO of global airlines taking a surprise flight to London around this time. Could this be him? As Clara and Richard strolled down the aisle toward the first-class section, engaging in light conversation, Maya suddenly understood the dynamic. Clara wasn't just a flight attendant, she was the CEO's wife. The realization hit her like a jolt. No wonder she carried herself with such an air of entitlement. Just as they were passing Maya's row, Richard's gaze happened to fall upon her. He offered a polite, almost apologetic smile, perhaps sensing the residual tension in the air from Clara's earlier interaction. Maya managed a small, somewhat awkward smile in return. But then Richard's eyes traveled upwards, and he saw it. Maya's simple canvas duffel bag in the overhead compartment. And then his gaze flicked to Clara, who was now a few steps ahead, already settling him into his spacious first-class seat. A subtle frown creased Richard's brow. He turned back to Maya, his expression now more inquisitive. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Was there an issue with your bag?" Maya hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She didn't want to cause trouble, but the memory of Clara's condescending remarks was still fresh. Before Maya could formulate an answer, Clara's voice, now laced with a hint of nervousness, interjected from the front. "Oh, darling, no issue at all. Just ensuring all our passengers are comfortable." Richard turned to his wife, his eyes searching hers. There was a look in them that Clara clearly understood, a silent question that brooked no evasion. The practiced smile on her face wavered slightly. He turned back to Maya, his gaze direct and unwavering. "Miss, I would appreciate your honest answer. Was there a problem with your carry-on?" All eyes in the immediate vicinity seemed to be on them now. Maya took a deep breath. This was her chance. She decided to speak the truth, calmly and without embellishment. "The flight attendant," she began, glancing briefly at Clara, who was now watching them with a look of barely concealed irritation, "suggested that my bag might not fit and implied that I should check it because other passengers had more substantial luggage." A muscle twitched in Richard's jaw. He looked from Maya to Clara, his expression unreadable. The silence in the cabin seemed to deepen, the usual pre-flight noises fading into a distant hum. Everyone around them sensed that something significant was unfolding. Clara's face had lost its practiced composure. A flush was creeping up her neck, and her eyes darted nervously between her husband and Maya. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to offer an explanation or a denial, but Richard raised a hand, silencing her. "Thank you for your honesty, Miss—" He paused, waiting for her to offer her name. "Johnson," Maya supplied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Maya Johnson." "Miss Johnson," Richard said, his gaze now fixed on Clara, his voice dangerously low. "I will have a word with my wife about this misunderstanding." He turned back to Maya, offering a genuine, apologetic smile this time. "Please enjoy your flight." He then turned and walked towards the first-class section, Clara trailing behind him like a chastised puppy. The air in the economy cabin crackled with unspoken tension. Passengers exchanged bewildered glances. The incident had been brief but impactful, leaving a lingering sense of unease and anticipation. Maya leaned back in her seat, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over her. Relief that Richard had intervened, apprehension about the potential repercussions, and a strange sense of vindication. She hadn't set out to cause trouble, but she hadn't backed down either. The flight attendants, who had witnessed the exchange, now moved with a newfound caution around Maya, their usual professional detachment replaced by a hesitant politeness. Clara, for the rest of the boarding process, remained conspicuously absent from the economy section. Once the plane took off and the initial rush subsided, a senior flight attendant, a woman with kind eyes and a reassuring demeanor named Susan, approached Maya. "Miss Johnson," she said softly, "Mr. Albright asked me to personally apologize for the way you were treated. He assures you that this is not the standard of service he expects from his staff." Maya nodded, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you," she said. "I understand." Susan hesitated for a moment, then added, "Mrs. Albright has been spoken to." There was a subtle emphasis on those last two words, and a knowing look in Susan's eyes that suggested the conversation had not been a pleasant one for Clara. The rest of the flight to London was uneventful for Maya. She tried to focus on her upcoming studies, but her mind kept drifting back to the encounter with Clara and the unexpected intervention of Richard Albright. It was a stark reminder of the power dynamics at play in the world and the impact of even small acts of prejudice. When the plane landed at Heathrow, Maya gathered her belongings, her trusty canvas duffel bag now feeling like a badge of honor rather than a source of shame. As she disembarked, she couldn't help but notice Clara standing near the exit, her face pale and drawn. Richard was nowhere in sight. Clara's eyes met Maya's for a fleeting moment. There was no trace of the earlier arrogance, only a look of cold fury and resentment. It was a look that sent a shiver down Maya's spine, a silent promise that this was not the end of their interaction. As Maya walked through the jet bridge and into the bustling terminal, she tried to shake off the unsettling encounter. She had a new adventure awaiting her in London, and she didn't want to let one unpleasant incident overshadow her experience. But she couldn't help but wonder what the consequences of Clara's actions would be, and whether their paths would cross again. Little did Maya know, the ripples of that brief exchange on the plane were just beginning to spread, and the misunderstanding that Richard Albright had promised to address would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. The story of the flight attendant and the CEO's unexpected intervention was about to become a real-life drama with twists and turns that no one could have predicted. The soft clinking of cutlery against fine china was the only sound that punctuated the thick, heavy silence in the first-class cabin. For Richard Albright, the gourmet meal placed before him might as well have been cardboard. He sat opposite his wife Clara, the spacious pod that was supposed to offer privacy and luxury, now feeling like a gilded cage. He had waited until the meal service was underway, giving them a semblance of normalcy before addressing the ugly scene that had played out in the economy cabin. "Clara," he began, his voice low and devoid of its usual warmth. He placed his fork down deliberately. "Explain yourself." Clara, who had been pushing a piece of lobster around her plate, looked up, her expression a careful mask of indignation. "Explain myself?" "Richard, honestly, you're making a spectacle over nothing. The girl's bag was unsightly. I was simply trying to maintain the standards of this airline." "Your airline." Richard stared at her, a profound sense of disappointment washing over him. It wasn't just about the incident. It was about the chasm it revealed between them, a chasm that had been widening for years. "Standards? Is that what you call publicly shaming a young woman? Humiliating a customer based on the perceived cost of her luggage?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed, taking a sip of her champagne. "It's not about the cost, it's about decorum. We cultivate an image of exclusivity, of quality. That shabby bag didn't fit the aesthetic. I was doing my job." "Your job?" Richard's voice hardened. "Your job, Clara, is to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers, not to act as the self-appointed fashion police. That young woman, Maya Johnson, is a paying customer. Her ticket is worth just as much as anyone else's in that cabin. Do you have any idea how you made her feel?" "I'm sure she'll get over it," Clara replied flippantly, waving a dismissive hand. She seemed perfectly capable of standing up for herself. In fact, I'd say she was rather impertinent. Richard felt a surge of anger. "Impertinent?" "She was respectful and firm. You were the one who was out of line. Completely and utterly. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. This isn't just about a bag, is it, Clara? This is about your prejudice. The same prejudice I've seen you display at charity galas and country club dinners. I've tolerated it in our private life, made excuses for it, but I cannot have it poison my company. Clara's face tightened, her blue eyes turning to chips of ice. How dare you? I am not prejudiced. I simply have standards, something you seem to have forgotten in your quest to be the people's CEO. The accusation hung in the air. Richard knew what she meant. He had spent the last 5 years trying to steer global airlines away from its old-fashioned, elitist reputation, implementing policies focused on inclusivity and customer service for everyone, not just those in the front of the plane. Clara had always viewed these efforts with disdain, seeing them as a dilution of the brand's prestige. My quest, Richard said, his voice laced with steel, is about building a sustainable, modern airline, one that doesn't alienate its customer base with petty snobbery. What you did today was a direct contradiction of everything we are trying to build, and you did it in front of my employees and my customers. He sank back into his seat, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. When we land in London, you are on an official leave of absence, effective immediately. Clara's jaw dropped. A leave of absence? You can't be serious. Richard, I've been with this airline for 20 years. You can't just bench me like a naughty schoolgirl. I can and I am, he stated unequivocally. You will attend mandatory sensitivity and anti-bias training. You will write a formal, sincere apology to Miss Johnson, and you will not set foot on a global airlines plane as an employee until I am satisfied that you understand the gravity of your actions. Tears of fury and humiliation welled in Clara's eyes. This is because of her, isn't it? That girl. You're taking her side over your own wife's. This has nothing to do with taking sides, Richard replied, his voice weary. This is about right and wrong. It's about the integrity of my company. Your behavior was wrong, Clara, and there have to be consequences. He turned to look out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, the conversation over. Clara sat in stunned silence, her meticulously constructed world beginning to fracture. The humiliation was unbearable, but beneath it, a cold, hard anger began to solidify. This was not over. She would not be dismissed so easily. Unbeknownst to the warring Albrights, their private drama had not gone unnoticed. Seated 2 rows behind Maya in seat 25G, a man named Liam Peterson had observed the entire exchange with keen interest. Liam was not just another tourist. He was the creator of Wing It Wanderer, a travel blog with a fiercely loyal following of over 2 million readers. He built his brand on authentic, no-holds-barred reviews of airlines, hotels, and travel experiences. He had been quietly documenting his flight experience, as he always did, taking notes on his phone. He had noted the flight attendant's initial condescending tone, Maya's quiet dignity, and the shocking arrival of the CEO. He'd even discreetly recorded a 30-second audio clip of the confrontation when Richard Albright had stepped in, capturing the CEO's authoritative questions and Maya's clear, steady response. Liam knew he had a story, a big one. It was the kind of real-life drama his readers loved, a classic David and Goliath tale set at 30,000 feet. It touched on themes of class, race, and corporate accountability. He wrestled with how to present it. Naming an airline and its CEO was a bold move that could invite legal challenges. But the injustice of it gnawed at him. That young woman had been targeted and humiliated for no reason other than a stranger's snobbery. As the plane began its descent into London, Liam made his decision. He wouldn't name names. Not yet. He would write it as a blind item, a story where the identities are withheld, allowing the details to speak for themselves and the internet to do the rest. He titled the draft in his notes, "The CEO's Wife, the Student, and the Carry-On Bag, an in-flight tale of shame." He knew it would cause a stir. Meanwhile, Maya Johnson was blissfully unaware of the corporate and digital storm brewing in her wake. The moment her feet touched the ground at Heathrow, a wave of pure, unadulterated excitement washed over her, eclipsing the unpleasantness of the flight. After navigating customs and baggage claim, she found the pre-booked car that would take her to her student housing in Bloomsbury. The flat was a charming, slightly chaotic space shared with three other international students. There was Chloe, a bubbly fashion student from Australia, Kenji, a quiet and intense engineering postgrad from Japan, and Sophia, a fiery political science major from Spain. They welcomed her with open arms, a shared pizza, and a whirlwind of questions about America. "So how was the flight?" Chloe asked, gesturing with a slice of pepperoni pizza. Maya paused for a moment. "It was interesting," she said with a wry smile. She briefly recounted the story of the flight attendant and the bag, framing it more as a bizarre travel anecdote than a deeply hurtful experience. Sophia, ever the activist, was outraged on her behalf. "That is unacceptable. It's pure classism, maybe with a touch of racism. You should file a formal complaint. Name and shame." Maya shrugged, unpacking her well-traveled duffel bag and placing her few belongings into the small wardrobe. "Honestly, I just want to forget about it. The CEO actually stepped in and apologized. It's over. I'm here now, and I just want to focus on starting this amazing adventure." And for the next few days, she did just that. She immersed herself in London life, marveling at the history etched into every street corner, navigating the labyrinthine tube, and preparing for her orientation at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. The incident on the plane faded into the background, a minor blip on the radar of a life-altering journey. She felt free, anonymous, and full of hope. She had no idea that her name, Maya Johnson, was about to become a topic of intense speculation on the other side of the world. Back in the corporate headquarters of Global Airlines in Chicago, Richard Albright was not feeling hopeful. He was in full damage control mode. The flight back from London, which he had taken on a different carrier, leaving Clara to stew in their Mayfair flat, had been spent in frantic communication with his leadership team. His first call had been to Isabella Rossi, his razor-sharp head of corporate communications. "How bad is it?" he'd asked, pacing the length of his office. Isabella's voice on the other end of the line was grim. "Potentially catastrophic, Richard. We have to assume other people witnessed it. In the age of social media, a story like this doesn't stay quiet for long. A flight attendant, who is also the CEO's wife, belittling a passenger, it's a PR nightmare. It hits all the hot-button issues: privilege, class, potential racial bias. It makes us look like everything you've been fighting against." "Clara's on leave," Richard said, rubbing his temples. "She'll be undergoing training." "That's a good first step for an internal HR matter," Isabella conceded. "But we need to think externally. We need to get ahead of this. If this story breaks, we can't be reactive. We need to have a strategy." "What do you suggest?" "We need to find the passenger, Maya Johnson. We need to reach out to her, offer a formal apology from the company, and make a significant gesture of goodwill. A full refund, a voucher for future travel, perhaps even a contribution to her educational fund. We need to show that we take this seriously and that her experience does not represent our values." Richard agreed. It was the right thing to do, both ethically and strategically. He instructed his team to track down Maya Johnson's contact information through her booking details. But before they could act, the first domino fell. Isabella called Richard back late that night. Her voice was urgent. "It started," she said. "A travel blog, Wing It Wanderer, just posted a piece. It's a blind item, no names, but the details are specific. Transatlantic flight, a student's canvas bag, a senior flight attendant, an unexpected intervention from a top executive. He even mentions the airline's recent rebranding efforts towards inclusivity, which makes the hypocrisy stand out." Richard felt a cold dread creep into his stomach. "How bad is it?" "It's already got thousands of shares," Isabella reported. "The comments section is a firestorm. People are trying to guess the airline. And Richard, our name is coming up. A lot." The anonymous story had been unleashed. The fuse was lit. The internet, with its insatiable appetite for drama and justice, had begun its work. Thousands of miles away, asleep in her London flat, Maya Johnson had no idea she was at the center of a burgeoning scandal, one that was about to test the foundations of a corporate empire and a powerful marriage, and deliver a lesson in karma that would be anything but private. Liam Peterson's blog post was not just a spark, it was a detonation. The internet's collective sense of justice, honed by countless viral incidents, went to work with terrifying efficiency. Within 12 hours, the blind item was stripped of its anonymity. It started in the comment section of Wing It Wanderer. Major U.S. carrier with recent inclusivity campaign? Sounds like Global Airlines to me. They've been pushing their Travel for All ads everywhere. Then the aviation forums lit up. Someone claiming to be a Global Airlines employee, writing under a pseudonym, posted, "Rumor in the crew lounge is that the CEO's wife, Clara Albright, a senior FA, had a major blow-up on the LHR flight 2 days ago. Fits the description perfectly." The final piece of the puzzle was a photo. A passenger who had been seated across the aisle from Maya, amused by the initial absurdity of the situation, had snapped a quick, blurry photo of Clara gesturing towards the overhead bin. They posted it on Twitter with the caption, "You won't believe what this Global Airlines flight attendant said to a young passenger about her bag." The tweet, linked to Liam's blog post, was the final confirmation. The story now had names and a face. Global Shame and Clara Albright began trending. News outlets, sensing blood in the water, pounced. Forbes, PR nightmare. At 30,000 feet, how a carry-on bag could cost Global Airlines millions. The Daily Mail, airline CEO's snob. Wife humiliates young black student over her unsightly luggage on London flight. CNN, viral incident puts spotlight on prejudice and privilege in air travel. Who is Maya Johnson? The story had taken on a life of its own. It was no longer about a simple confrontation. It was a referendum on corporate hypocrisy, entitlement, and systemic prejudice. Richard Albright's carefully crafted image of an inclusive, modern airline was being dismantled, tweet by tweet, article by article. The company's stock, which had been on a steady climb, dipped 4% at the opening bell. The board of directors was panicking. In her Bloomsbury flat, Maya Johnson awoke to the insistent buzzing of her phone. She groggily reached for it, assuming it was a message from her family back in Ohio. Instead, she saw dozens of notifications, friend requests from strangers, messages, tags on Instagram and Twitter. "What is going on?" she murmured, sitting up in bed. Her flatmate Chloe burst into the room, her eyes wide, holding her laptop. "Maya, you need to see this." Chloe turned the laptop around. On the screen was a major news site, and to Maya's horror, a candid photo of her from her university profile was splashed next to a professional headshot of Clara Albright. The headline screamed above them. Maya's blood ran cold. She read the article, her heart pounding against her ribs. Then another, and another. They had her name, her university, her field of study. They had Liam Peterson's blog post, the anonymous crew member's confirmation, the passenger's tweet. They had pieced together the entire narrative, embellishing it with speculative details about her feelings and motivations. She was being painted as a symbol, a victim, a hero, and she hadn't said a word to anyone but her flatmates. How did they get all of this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's everywhere," Sophia said, joining them in the doorway, her expression grim. "They found your social media. People are calling you a warrior for standing up to her." "But," she trailed off, her brow furrowed with concern. The "but" was the wave of reporters that had apparently begun to stake out the entrance to their university campus. Her email inbox was flooded with requests for interviews from journalists around the world. Her private, hopeful journey had been hijacked and turned into a public spectacle. The vindication she had felt was replaced by a profound sense of violation. This wasn't justice, this was an invasion. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and terrified. She curled up on her bed, pulling a blanket around her. "I just wanted to come here and study," she said, her voice small. "I didn't ask for any of this." Across London, in a lavishly appointed Mayfair flat, Clara Albright was experiencing her own version of hell. She stared at the screen of her tablet, her face a mask of pale fury. Every article, every vitriolic comment was a personal attack. They called her a Karen of the skies, a racist, a bully. Her carefully curated image of elegance and authority had been shattered, replaced by a caricature of a hateful, entitled shrew. But remorse was the furthest thing from her mind. All she felt was a burning, white-hot rage. Rage at the ungrateful passenger who had dared to challenge her. Rage at the faceless mob on the internet. But most of all, rage at her husband, Richard. He had done this. He had thrown her to the wolves to protect his precious company and his progressive reputation. He had sided with a stranger over his own wife. In her mind, the narrative began to twist and warp. She wasn't the aggressor, she was the victim. She had been trying to do her job, and she was being crucified for it. Her leave of absence now felt less like a disciplinary action and more like an imprisonment. She was isolated, humiliated, and stripped of her power. But Clara was a fighter. She would not go down without dragging everyone else with her. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't dialed in years. Nigel Finch. Finch was a greasy, bottom-feeding journalist for the Daily Standard, a tabloid known for its sensational headlines and morally ambiguous methods. He owed her a favor from years ago when she had discreetly fed him a tip about a rival celebrity's affair. It was time to call in the debt. "Nigel, darling," she purred into the phone, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "It's Clara Albright. I find myself in a bit of a pickle, and I have the most fascinating story for you. It's about a very ambitious young student who knows exactly how to manipulate a situation to her advantage. The real story, Nigel, the one no one else is telling." In his Chicago office, Richard Albright watched the stock ticker in the corner of his screen glow red. It was a tangible metric of the disaster unfolding. Isabella Rossi stood before his desk, her expression stark. "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning," she said. "They want a head on a platter, Richard, and right now, it looks like it could be yours or Clara's." "We tried to reach Maya Johnson," Richard said, the words tasting like ash. "Her university has put a block on all inquiries, citing student privacy. We sent an email to the address on her booking file, but we've received no response. She's gone silent." "Can you blame her?" Isabella shot back. "We need to do something drastic. A press release isn't going to cut it anymore. The narrative is that the billionaire CEO is hiding behind his PR team while his wife's racism tarnishes the brand. You need to be seen taking personal, decisive action." Richard knew she was right. He had to fix this, not as a CEO protecting an asset, but as a man trying to right a profound wrong, a wrong he had enabled by tolerating Clara's behavior for too long. "Book me a flight back to London, the first one out," he commanded. "I'm going to find Maya Johnson. I am going to apologize to her face-to-face on her terms, and I am going to listen to whatever she has to say." It was a desperate move, a Hail Mary in a storm of bad press. He didn't know if she would even see him. Hours later, Richard was on the corporate jet, flying back across the Atlantic, the weight of his company and his marriage pressing down on him. As his plane descended towards London City Airport, he sent a carefully worded text message to a number his team had finally managed to acquire for Maya through a university contact. "Ms. Johnson, this is Richard Albright. I am in London and I am profoundly sorry for what has happened. I would be grateful for the opportunity to apologize in person. Please let me know if and when you would be willing to speak with me. I will respect whatever you decide." He sent the message and waited, his stomach in knots. In her flat, Maya's phone buzzed. She saw the name Richard Albright, and her anxiety spiked. Her friends gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "What do you do?" Chloe asked softly. "I don't know," Maya confessed, staring at the message. Part of her wanted to tell him to leave her alone. Another part, the part that had been so deeply humiliated on that plane, wanted to confront him, to make him understand the real-world impact of his wife's cruelty and the subsequent media circus. Before she could decide, Sophia's phone pinged with a news alert. She gasped, her face paling. "Oh my God, Maya, you're not going to believe this." She held up her phone. It was the online edition of the Daily Standard. The headline was pure, poisonous, tabloid gold. "Exclusive, carry-on victim. Maya Johnson has history of aggressive complaints," says Airline insider. Was it all a staged shakedown? Beneath the headline was a venomous article quoting an anonymous source, Clara, painting Maya as an opportunistic scammer who had deliberately provoked the incident, hoping for a payout. It was a character assassination, filled with fabricated details and vicious lies. Maya stared at the screen, a wave of nausea washing over her. The story had taken another dark, vicious turn. At the same moment, Richard Albright's car was pulling up to his London flat, unaware that his wife had just poured gasoline on a raging fire. The chance for a simple apology was gone. A war had just been declared. The publication of the Daily Standard's article was like a match thrown into a munitions factory. The internet, which had been unified in its condemnation of Clara, was now fractured. Vicious debates erupted. Trolls, energized by the counter-narrative, attacked Maya's character, while her supporters fought back with even greater ferocity. The story became a chaotic mess of accusations and counter-accusations. For Isabella Rossi and the Global Airlines PR team, it was the worst-case scenario. The scandal was no longer a contained fire. It was an uncontrollable wildfire. When Richard Albright's car pulled up to the Mayfair flat, he was still unaware of this latest development. He walked into the opulent living room to find Clara sipping a glass of wine, a triumphant smirk on her face. She held up her tablet, displaying the tabloid article like a trophy. "A bit of a problem for your PR team, isn't it, darling?" she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Now it's not quite so black and white. Now people are seeing the other side of the story." Richard stared at the headline, then at his wife. The last vestiges of affection or sympathy he held for her evaporated in an instant, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. He saw her not as the woman he had once loved, but as a stranger, a cruel, vindictive person who would burn down everything around her to save her own vanity. "What have you done, Clara?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I fought back," she snapped, rising from her chair. "Something you should have done for me. I protected my reputation since you were too busy protecting that little gold digger and your precious stock price." "Her name is Maya Johnson," Richard said, his voice like ice. "And you haven't protected anything. You've taken a crisis and turned it into a catastrophe. You lied, you slandered a customer, a young woman who did nothing to you, and you did it using your position. You leaked this story." "I did what I had to do," Clara retorted, her eyes flashing with defiance. "No," Richard said, a profound finality in his tone. "You did what you are? This is you, Clara. The prejudice, the cruelty, the pathological need to believe you are better than everyone else. I see it now. I've made excuses for it for years, but I won't anymore. I'm done." He took a step back, the decision solidifying in his mind. "This isn't just a leave of absence anymore. This is the end of your career and of us." Clara's smirk vanished, replaced by disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I'm filing for divorce," Richard stated plainly, "and as of this moment, your employment with Global Airlines is terminated. For cause. You breached your contract, your confidentiality agreement, and every ethical standard this company has by leaking a malicious and fabricated story about a passenger. Security is on its way to collect your company credentials and keys. You have 24 hours to vacate this flat. It's a corporate property." The color drained from Clara's face. The wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. "You can't," she stammered. "Richard, you can't do this. After 20 years, I'm your wife." "You were my wife," he corrected her, his gaze unwavering. "But the person who did this, the person who would try to destroy a young woman's life to save face, I don't know who that is, and frankly, I don't want to." He turned and walked out of the flat without a backward glance, leaving Clara standing amidst the shards of glass, her world utterly and irrevocably shattered. The hard karma she had set in motion for Maya had boomeranged back with devastating force, leaving her with nothing. The tabloid article, intended to destroy Maya's credibility, had the opposite effect on her. The initial shock and nausea gave way to a steely resolve. The fight was no longer just about a bag or a rude comment. It was about her name, her character, and her truth. She would not let those lies stand. That afternoon, she received an email from a prominent London-based civil rights organization offering pro bono legal counsel. After a long conversation with her parents and her new lawyer, Maya made a decision. She would not hide. She would reclaim her own story. She replied to Richard Albright's text. "Mr. Albright, I will meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. at my university's library. You will come alone, and you will listen." The next morning, the meeting took place in a small private study room. Richard, looking haggard but resolute, sat opposite Maya. She was not the timid girl he had seen on the plane, nor the helpless victim portrayed in the media. She was a composed, intelligent young woman radiating quiet strength. "Mr. Albright," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I want you to understand what your wife did. She didn't just insult my bag. She publicly humiliated me in a way that was designed to make me feel small and worthless. She used her uniform and her authority to enforce a social hierarchy where I was at the bottom. That was the first injury." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The second injury was having my life turned into a global news story without my consent. Having my privacy invaded, my character debated by millions of strangers. But the third and most painful injury was the article your wife planted. The lies she told to assassinate my character because she was held accountable for her actions. She tried to ruin my reputation and my future." Richard listened without interruption, his face a mask of shame and regret. When she finished, the silence was heavy. "Miss Johnson." "Maya," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "there are no words to adequately express how sorry I am. Sorry is not enough. What Clara did was reprehensible. There is no excuse, and I am sorry not just for her actions, but for my own. I was complacent for too long. I enabled the behavior that led to this, and the failure is mine as much as it is hers. You deserved respect, and you received cruelty. You deserved privacy, and you were thrust into a nightmare. You are owed more than an apology. You are owed action." He then told her everything, that he had terminated Clara's employment, that he had filed for divorce, that he was prepared to take the full force of the consequences. Maya was taken aback by the swiftness and severity of his actions. She saw in his eyes not a CEO doing damage control, but a man genuinely trying to make amends. "What I want," Maya said finally, "is for something good to come out of this ugliness. I want to ensure no other person, no matter what they look like or what bag they carry, ever feels the way I did on one of your planes." A look of profound respect crossed Richard's face. "I agree," as he said, "and I have an idea, if you'd be willing to hear it." 2 days later, Richard Albright stood before a podium at a packed press conference in London. The world's media was there, hungry for a statement. He didn't read from a script. He spoke from the heart. He began with an unequivocal public apology to Maya Johnson, praising her grace and courage. He announced Clara's termination and confirmed their separation, making it clear that her actions were a betrayal of the company's values. But then came the twist. "Apologies and punitive actions are not enough," he declared. "We must use this shameful incident as a catalyst for profound and permanent change. That is why today, Global Airlines is launching the Maya Johnson Initiative for Inclusivity." He announced the company was seeding a new foundation with an initial endowment of $10 million. The initiative would provide scholarships for students from underrepresented communities to study abroad, covering their tuition, travel, and expenses. Furthermore, it would fund a complete overhaul of the airline's staff training, developed in partnership with leading civil rights organizations, to focus on anti-bias, cultural competency, and de-escalation. And to ensure its integrity and focus, Richard concluded, his voice ringing with conviction, "We have invited Miss Maya Johnson to sit on its inaugural advisory board, should she choose to accept." The announcement was a masterstroke. It wasn't just a PR fix. It was a powerful, constructive response that turned a moment of shame into a legacy of opportunity. The story of Clara's downfall became a cautionary tale in corporate circles. Nigel Finch's career imploded after Global Airlines' legal team filed a multi-million-pound libel suit against the Daily Standard, which promptly fired him and issued a full retraction. Left with no job, no husband, and a reputation in tatters, Clara Albright faded into obscurity, a pariah in the social circles she had once so proudly dominated. Months later, Maya accepted the seat on the advisory board. She excelled in her studies, her experience having solidified her passion for global health and equity. The media attention faded, replaced by a quiet respect for the young woman who had faced down a corporation in a public smear campaign with dignity. As the semester ended, Maya boarded a Global Airlines flight back to Ohio for the holidays. A new flight attendant with a warm, genuine smile greeted her at the door. As Maya approached her seat, she lifted her trusty canvas duffel bag, the bag that started it all. It was no longer a source of anxiety, but a symbol of her journey. She placed it carefully in the overhead bin, where it fit perfectly. She settled into her seat, a feeling not of vindication, but of peace washing over her. The flight had ended, the turbulence was over, and ahead of her was nothing but a clear and open sky. So what's the real takeaway from Maya Johnson's incredible story? It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of prejudice can trigger the most seismic consequences. Clara Albright's moment of cruel snobbery didn't just ruin a young woman's day, it dismantled her own life and exposed the rotten foundations of a corporate culture. But more importantly, it shows the power of standing your ground with dignity. Maya didn't seek fame or revenge, she sought respect. And in doing so, she sparked a movement that will create opportunities for countless others. Her story proves that karma isn't just a myth. Sometimes it flies first class. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of justice and empowerment. What would you have done in Maya's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.